Chapter 75. Yang Chendong did not stop her. Although he could not be Lady Xue's master, he had still taught her, so it was only right for her to bow to him. After bowing, she saw that it was noon and knew that Dong Shuai was probably going to eat. Not daring to disturb him, she happily left the Yang clan manor with her maid Xiao Wei. Not long after they left, news came from the capital. Tonight, the 100 Flowers Hall of the Red Light District would be performing 2 new songs. They would only be sung once, so there were not many chances, so please make good use of them. The moment this news came out, many young masters who believed themselves to be elegant began to make arrangements with the young master to attend 100 Flowers Hall that night. Putting aside how lively the city had become, in the Yang clan manor, as Qiao Yin ate the delicious food that each Yor had made, she softly asked Yang Chendong, "Young master, didn't you say that you wanted to take Lady Xue and Lady Xiang for your own use? You said that they were both talents, so why didn't you say a single word about them?" Yang Chendong ate the food in his mouth as he shook his head and said, "Haste makes waste. If I act now, it will inevitably make people think that this young master is taking advantage of the situation. Let's wait. Fortunately, there is still time." Yang Chendong naturally had his own plans. Not saying it now did not mean that he would not say it in the future. It was just that the time was not right. He understood the principle of more haste, less speed. Although with his current status, it was not impossible for him to forcefully take her away. However, if he did so, it would inevitably give others a reason to criticize him. He was afraid that his reputation of bullying women would be tarnished. This was not something that he wanted to see. In comparison, Yang Chendong preferred the feeling of success when the conditions were right. But before that, he still had many other things to do. For example, there was one thing that he needed Xiao Yin to do. How about the young master arrange something for you?" Upon hearing that there was something to do, Xiao Yin hurriedly put down her bowl and chopsticks, an excited look on her face. "What is it?" "It's not difficult. I just want to make a trip to the capital and find some children between the ages of 14 and 18. Both men and women are fine. 50 of each. They must have good looks, good figures, and must be as tall as possible. Then we will hire all of them, sign a 3-year contract, and bring them back to the manor." Yang Chendong also put down his bowl and chopsticks, thinking of another plan, and said with a smile. Yang Chendong was about to start looking for the Immortal abode's attendants. A total of 100 people were prepared. Among them, the men were waiters, all wearing black jackets. The women were waitresses, all wearing black cheongsams. He had come here to study. He wanted to make a Yang Chendong analysis of the 3 kingdoms. It took Yang Chendong 4 hours to come out of the study room. When the sun was about to set, Yang Chendong walked out. He saw Tiger's Mane waiting for him. The young master's study couldn't be entered unless there was something important. Moreover, when entering, one had to first pull on the doorbell, a so-called drawstring device. Once one pulled on the doorbell, one would be able to hear the sound from the inside. Only after obtaining permission could one enter. This was Yang Chendong's requirement for everyone around him. Even Xiao Yin and Tiger's Mane weren't allowed to break this rule. This was also a habit that Yang Chendong had instilled in everyone. This way, when he needed to enter the large warehouse, he didn't have to worry about someone suddenly appearing outside to disturb him. When he saw Tiger's Mane waiting for him outside with a calm expression, he knew that there was nothing urgent. As Yang Chendong walked over, he asked Tiger's Mane, "Has everything been taken care of?" "It's been taken care of. All the 5th-rank officials in the capital, including the Duke's estates, Marquis estates, Count's estates, and even the Imperial Palace, have been sent over according to the number that was previously agreed upon," Tiger's Mane respectfully replied. "Very good. Is there anyone who doesn't accept them?" "There isn't." Tiger's Mane pondered for a moment. Indeed, there wasn't any news of anyone confiscating toilet paper. Thus, he nodded affirmatively and said, "They've all accepted them." Not bad. This answer was somewhat out of Yang Chendong's expectations. He originally thought that there would be independent people like Yu Qian who wouldn't accept gifts. He didn't expect them to accept all of them. It seemed like they thought that toilet paper wasn't worth much, which was why they accepted it so easily. Since that was the case, he would give them a heavy blow later on. He wanted them to understand that toilet paper wasn't a piece of white paper. It was an existence that was much more valuable than that. Do we have enough toilet paper in the warehouse? It's sufficient. It's definitely enough to deal with the capital. Also, Crimson City is speeding up. The first batch of goods is already on its way to the capital. Wang Zhen has also sent someone over to deliver the Eastern Faction Depot's pass token. It can guarantee that the goods will be able to pass through without any obstructions. Tiger's Mane explained the matter of the Eastern Faction Depot's pass token. Upon hearing this, Yang Chendong chuckled and said, "That Wang Zhen is a smart person. He knows that it's hard to get anything back without any effort. This is good. It'll save us a lot of trouble. With the Eastern Faction Depot's pass, our goods will be safer along the way. It will also save us a lot of trouble. We can also save a lot of filial piety along the way," Tiger's Mane said excitedly. "No." Yang Chendong stretched out his index finger and said, "We still have to pay the necessary filial piety along the way. You must know that in many cases, a county official isn't as good as a local official. There's no need to make enemies and trouble just to save some money." Seeing how certain Yang Chendong was, Tiger's Mane's expression turned cold and he said, "Yes, Tiger's Mane will remember it. I'll instruct them later. By the way, young Master 4 sent an invitation. He said that there will be a new song at 100 Flowers Hall tonight. He invited young Master 4 to go with him." "No need. I still have to make all kinds of drinks with the cook, Ichior, tonight. I won't be going to 100 Flowers Hall. But you have to send someone to keep an eye on the situation there and report back to this young Master 4. Yang Chendong shook his head. Although he also wanted to see Madame Snow's elegance, there were too many things that he needed to do. He had to do everything himself. When things were on the right track, he could relax a little. "Yes." Tiger's Mane replied and went to arrange things. Yang Chendong strode toward the kitchen in the backyard. Xiaoyin hadn't returned yet, so he seized the time to go to the kitchen. Otherwise, when she came back, it was inevitable that she would warn him to stay away from the kitchen. The red light district of the capital. At this moment, 100 Flowers Hall was packed with people. Even though there was still an hour before the start of the competition, the place was already filled with people. For example, Su Qingzong, Zhang De, Wang Si, and the others who had appeared at the Nine Arts Workshop yesterday were also here. Furthermore, they were seated closer to the stage. They were all regulars of Nine Arts Workshop and had a rather special status there. But after listening to Yang Chendong's 3 new songs yesterday, their attitudes had changed. They had naturally lost interest in the songs that they had heard countless times before. Hearing that there was a new song in the 100 Flowers Hall, and that it was sent back by Madame Shui after she went to the Yangjia village during the day, how could she hold back? She immediately ordered the servants at home to book a table here. They weren't the only ones. The news of Nine Arts Workshop's new song had already spread throughout the capital. It was said that this matter had even been called to the morning court. Even the emperor knew of this matter. Once this matter was hyped up, everyone naturally knew about it. Countless people naturally came because of the fame, and for a moment, 100 Flowers Hall was packed to the brim. Chapter 76. Not only that, some round tables, which could only seat 4 or 5 people, were now filled with 7 or 8 people. Although it was a little crowded, it proved that there was a lively scene here. Mu Lily, the procuress, was a famous courtesan in the capital when she was young. Now she was in charge of the business of Baihua Hall. Although she was less than 30 years old, she was still very charming. When she saw the scene today, she couldn't stop smiling. Well, let's get busy. Don't neglect the guests. This is a good opportunity for our Baihua Hall to become famous. Mu Lily's eyes were almost narrowed into slits. She walked in the hall and greeted the guests warmly. She was afraid that she would be impolite and cause trouble because there were too many people. However, Mu Lily obviously thought too much. Today, everyone was here for the new song. At least, before they heard the new song, no one would casually cause trouble. This also made it so that although the number of people in the hall was several times more than usual, the order was not disrupted. After the performance, Madame Shui was still practicing. After all, she had only sung during the day. It was indeed a little hasty for her to perform at night. Moreover, there were so many guests today. What if she screwed up? What would she do? Wouldn't those nobles tear down 100 Flowers Hall? She had been on the stage many times, but she didn't know why she was so nervous today. She remembered that when she went on the stage for the first time, she was as nervous as she was now. Miss, you don't have to be so nervous. Although I have just learned this song, other than Dong Shui, no one else knows what the original song is like. On the other hand, Xiao Wei was thinking of ways to comfort her young miss. Xiao Wei's words made sense, but Madame Shui still shook her head stubbornly. No, I have to live up to Dong Shui's trust. By the way, Xiao Wei, is Dong Shui here tonight? Xiao Wei wanted to lie to her miss, who was full of expectation. However, she knew that she could not lie to her miss when she went on the stage. She shook her head reluctantly. Dong Shui didn't come. He didn't come? Obviously, Madame Shui was somewhat disappointed. Judging from the way Dong Shui looked at her during the day, he should still like her. At the very least, he admired her. If that was the case, why couldn't he come to 100 Flowers Hall today when he could go to 9 Arts Workshop yesterday? Seeing that her young miss was in low spirits, Xiao Wei was afraid that something bad would happen. She quickly added, I've sent someone to check. Dong Shui didn't go to Geo Arts Workshop today. Perhaps this was the only good news. At least it proved that Yang Chendong was not biased. I see. Sure enough, Madame Snow's expression became much better after hearing that. As a woman in the entertainment field, perhaps her competitive nature was stronger. When she heard that Dong Shui didn't go anywhere, her mood became much better. The guests at the front desk did not know what was going on backstage, nor did they know that the heart of their goddess, who had always wanted to get close to her, had already flown out of the venue and was no longer with the guests. Time passed little by little, and it was getting closer and closer to the start of the show. The geisha, who was warming up the scene, had already gone up the stage. However, both the performers and the audience were obviously absent-minded. They were all waiting for the 2 new songs to come on the stage. Finally, Madame Snow, who was dressed in white, went up the stage accompanied by her maid, Xiao Wei. Accompanied by a burst of enthusiastic applause, of course, no one knew whether it was a farewell applause. Lady Shui's clothes were as white as snow, and her skin was white and tender. Her skin was as clean as a baby's. Coupled with her graceful figure, she received a wave of applause as soon as she stepped onto the stage. The applause went on for a long time until Madame Snow sat down on the guzheng. At that moment, the whole venue became very quiet. In the silence, under the eager eyes of the audience, the sound of the guzheng rang softly, accompanied by Madame Snow's pleasant monologue. A long time ago, there was a firearms camp. Song Laosan and his family lived next to it. They had nothing to do. The monologue was to let more people know the story so that they could understand the main idea of the song. It was also specially requested by Yang Chendong. At least, the monologue was still needed before the song became a hit. When people became familiar with the song, the monologue could be skipped at any time. The monologue made people's expressions change again and again. From the monologue, they seemed to have seen the tragic ending of the young couple who loved each other. In the corner of the hall, a handsome scholar with a white face was listening to the monologue with tears in his eyes. Beside her, there was a handsome attendant accompanying her. However, she seemed to have forgotten her role, which was to look after the young master. At this moment, her eyes were also filled with tears. She was like a dam that was about to burst, and the rain could pour down at any time. Little Qing, how do you think he came up with such a tragic story? Is Little Six really referring to himself? Did he really have such an unforgettable love when he was young? The seated young master gently wiped away the tears that were about to flow out and asked the attendant standing beside him. Little master, I don't know. The attendant shook her head and said in a choked voice. In the hall, many people were moved and affected by the story, but none of them shed tears like the 2 girls. The situation here was naturally noticed by the diners at the surrounding tables. Some people naturally looked over. Lower your head. Noticing that some people were looking at her table, the young master, quickly lowered her head, and so did the attendant who accompanied her. The two girls reacted quickly. In addition, the place was a little remote and the light was dim, so the others could not see what was going on. Then they all turned back to the stage. Sensing that other people were not looking at them, the master and the attendant looked up and made faces at each other. It was also at this moment that their mischievous nature was revealed. If Lord Hu Zhangning was here, he would definitely be shocked to discover that these two so-called young masters and errand boys were actually his precious daughter, Hu Yan, and her personal maid, Xiao Qing. They came here naturally because they heard that Baihua Hall was going to sing a new song at night. They also knew that Madame Shui had just returned from Yangjia village during the day, which made them even more curious. After some discussion, they decided to come here in person to see what Madame Shui looked like. Let's see if this new song is really as good as the rumors outside say, that it can really make people unforgettable, and has the effect of making people feel relaxed and happy. The tip of the peach leaf is sharp, and the willow leaf is holding up the sky. Lord Ming in his position, listen to me carefully. After the narration, the song officially began. With Madame Shui's beautiful voice, a refreshing song entered people's ears, which made people feel comfortable and comfortable. Unlike Yang Chendong's voice, Madame Shui's voice seemed to be sadder. Even Su Qingzong, Zhang De, Wang Si, and Yang Yang had the same feeling. There was a beginning and an end. When the song came to an end, there was silence in the field at first. Then, there was an earth-shattering applause. It seemed to form a heat wave, which was about to melt Madame Shui on the platform. Thank you. Seeing the effect, Madame Shui stood up and said, "Greetings to everyone." Then she slowly sat down and put her slender fingers on the zither. The tune of "Wishing People Forever" began to reverberate in the Hall of Blossoms. People were first attracted by the clean tone of the song. Before long, Madame Shui's beautiful voice rang out. "When will the moon be bright?" With a cup of wine in my hand, I asked the sky. "I wonder what year it is in the heavenly palace." Geo Arts Workshop. It was not as lively as yesterday. In fact, it was even quieter than before. Although Madame Shui's name had been hung outside the Geo Arts Workshop today, and it did attract some young master and child masters, their status could not be compared with that of the guests in Baihua Hall. On the stage, Madame Shui just sang 2 old songs and then left with a sad face. As soon as she went backstage, Chuina, the procuress, came up to her and said, "Sister Hanxiang, it's all my fault. I shouldn't have stopped you from going to Dong Shui yesterday." "No, Sister Chui, it's not your fault. Thought too much. I've decided to go to Yang village tomorrow. No matter what, I'll ask Dong Shui to teach me 2 songs." Madame Shui looked very determined and confident. She regretted it when she learned that Madame Shui had gone to Yang village during the day. Then the news came out that Madame Snow had learned 2 new songs and had gotten Dong Shui's permission to sing them in public for the first time in the 100 Flowers Hall that night. She regretted it even more. Yang Chendong was the first to come to Geo Arts Workshop, so she had the advantage. However, she did not seize the opportunity and gave all the benefits to others. How could Madame Shui, who still had the title of courtesan, accept this? Whether it was to fight back or for the future business of Geo Arts Workshop, she needed to see Dong Shui again. She wanted to humbly ask for advice and restore her prestige. The curfew was about to start. A large number of people in Baihua Hall began to leave and go their separate ways. In the crowd, 2 young masters, Hu Yan and Little Qing, who were dressed as young masters, were hurriedly walking in the direction of the Hu mansion. They had come out in disguise this time. If their grandfather, father, and mother found out, it would be a scandal. The dignified young mistress of the Hu family went to the red light district and went to Baihua Hall to listen to songs. Once such a shocking matter was spread out, the Hu family would definitely be criticized for not having a good upbringing. Even if Hu Yan could find a suitable marriage, it would be hard to say. Chapter 77. The 2 of them ran all the way before the curfew. When they arrived at the small alley in front of the back door of the Hu estate, Hu Yan supported herself against the wall and panted as she spoke to her maidservant Xiao Qing, who also looked as if she had fallen apart. "Let's rest for a while before entering the estate." Otherwise, if father sees us, we will be in big trouble. What are you afraid of me seeing you? A deep male voice rang out beside her. It wasn't loud, but it sounded like a clap of thunder in Hu Yan's ears. Goes. As soon as she heard someone else's voice, the servant girl Xiaoqing screamed instinctively and then hid behind Miss Hu Yan. Xiaoqing, what are you doing? I can't tell. That's my father's voice. However, Hu Yan was still able to keep her composure. This was mainly because she had heard that voice for so many years and was already very familiar with it. Hu Yan grabbed the panicked Xiaoqing and lowered her head as if she had done something wrong. Father, I'm just bored at home, so I went out for a stroll. Stroll? Gao Xing, you tell me? His voice suddenly became more severe, and two figures flashed out of the alley. It was Hu Zhangning and one of his subordinates, Gao Xing, one of the two people who had been taught a lesson by Beta Persei in the Jian Estate's Yang family mansion. Sir. In the afternoon, Xiaoqing found Lieutenant Sun Chuang, the other person who had been beaten by Beta Persei, and asked him to book a table at 100 Flowers Hall. Enough. Without waiting for Gao Sheng to continue, Hu Yan had already interrupted him. Since her father had even investigated this, there was no point in explaining anything. Father, I was just curious about what the two new songs were like, so you dared to go to 100 Flowers Hall? Do you know what kind of place that is? Do you know what will happen if your identity is exposed, or if you meet a lecher? Do you know? Hu Zhangning was obviously very angry, and scolded Hu Yan for a long time in one breath. In the end, Hu Zhangning, who had been criticizing Hu Yan for a long time, made the final decision. Hu Yan did not abide by the rules. She will be grounded for a month. Maid Xiaoqing didn't do what a maid should do. She didn't take good care of her master. She was punished with half a year's salary and 2 beatings. Gao Sheng sent someone to carry out the punishment. Lieutenant Sun Chuang is reckless. His salary will be deducted for half a year, and he will also be punished with 10 planks. Hu Zhangning angrily turned around and left, leaving behind Hu Yan with an incredulous look on her face. Father, you can punish me however you want, but don't hit Xiaoqing. It's too painful to hit her with 2 strokes of the paddle. Ignoring his daughter, Hu Zhangning walked faster and faster, as if he would change his mind if he slowed down a little. Unable to call out to her father, Hu Yan had no choice but to look at Gao Xing for help. Lieutenant Gao, can you write down little Qing's 2 paddles first? I will go and plead with my father, okay? No, we have to carry out my lord's orders. Gao Xing shook his head. This time, Hu Zhangning was truly angry. Even Lieutenant Sun Chuang had to be punished with 10 planks. If he dared to disobey orders and not hit Xiaoqing, then he would be the one to be hit. Yang Chendong didn't know that Hu Yan had disguised herself as a man and gone to the 100 Flowers Hall to listen to a new song, only to be caught red-handed by Lord Hu Zhangning and put under house arrest. He was currently in the kitchen with Yi Qiuya, experimenting with various drinks in preparation for the opening of the Immortal abode. What he didn't know was that on this very night, Gao Xiong's naval and land forces launched a joint operation to seize Flag Mountain. In the early years of the Ming dynasty, the old prince of Zhongshan, Shang Baji, conquered Shannon. Together with Shanbei and Zhongshan, they formed the unified Ryukyu kingdom, the first Shang dynasty. This was also the golden age of the Ryukyu kingdom. Its commerce was highly developed, and it traded with the Ming dynasty, Korea, Southeast Asia, and Japan. However, all of this had just begun when it was forced to stop because of Yang Chendong. Gao Xiong led a powerful navy to harass and surround the Ryukyu Islands. This caused the Ryukyu kingdom to suffer great losses. Its maritime trade was hindered, and it became a closed country. Qiqian City was occupied, and the sea routes were sealed. This caused the 6th-generation king to die of anger, and the successor was the 7th-generation king, Shangde, who was still underage. Shangde was only 12 years old. Because of his father's early death, he took over the throne. However, even though he was the king of a territory, he still couldn't change the current situation of the Ryukyu Islands. He had sent out ships to break out of the encirclement and inform the outside world of the situation. However, without exception, all of the ships he sent were sunk as soon as they left the harbor. It had to be said that the Ryukyu kingdom was also plagued with misfortune. It had only been less than 20 years since the first prince of Zhongshan, Baji, had taken over, and several kings had died. They had either died of illness or met with mishaps while out at sea. Now, all of the burden had fallen on the young Shangda's shoulders. How could he not be worried? After trying all sorts of methods, he finally decided to stay put and wait for reinforcements. Perhaps after a while, someone would discover that something was wrong with the Ryukyu Islands, and they would send people to investigate. Shangda still held onto a sliver of hope, but Gao Xiong couldn't wait any longer. Before Yang Chendong left Qiqian City, he had told him that once the population was sufficient, he had to think about expansion. The first thing he had to do was to take over the entire Ryukyu kingdom and occupy the entire island. Now, every few days, there would be ships going back and forth between the Black Dock and Qiqian City. The people on those ships were all Han people of the Great Ming Dynasty. They had all been secretly obtained by Lung Song during Deng Maoqi's uprising. Lung Song completely obeyed Yang Chendong's orders. He plundered everyone he saw and robbed everything he saw. Qiqian City, which originally had a low population base, began to rapidly expand. Although he didn't see any danger yet, Gao Xiong still remembered what the sixth young master had said: if a man doesn't think far ahead, he will definitely have immediate worries. For this reason, he decided to attack Qishan, which was the closest to Qiqian City, in the southwest. Based on the principle of obtaining the greatest victory with the least casualties, Gao Xiong made a detailed pre-battle plan before he made his move. He gathered the 1st Company Commander 1st Lieutenant Xiao Feng and 3rd Company 1st Lieutenant Chang Tingshan at home and came up with a plan to attack Qishan from both inside and outside. At the beginning of the 9th month of the 13th year of the Great Ming Dynasty, when Yang Chendong had just arrived in the capital and was still stirring up trouble, Gao Xiong started his operation. That night, the wind was strong. Especially for an island like Ryukyu, the wind was even stronger at night. The flag on the city wall of Qishan swayed vigorously and the flagpole seemed as though it would break at any moment. On such a night, it was rare for anyone to come out. It was the same even on the city wall. The few soldiers of the Shang dynasty who were in charge of night duty had already hidden in a small hut to rest. In the small hut, 20 soldiers were all squeezed together. This made Captain Li Luan unhappy. If everyone is here to rest, who will be guarding the city wall? What if those pirates attack us? Captain, don't worry too much. With such a strong sea breeze, wouldn't they be blown away by the wind if they wanted to climb up the city wall, which is more than 30 feet tall? Besides, I don't think there's anything wrong with those pirates. Occasionally, when the weather is good, us brothers can see them. Those people on the other side are wearing good clothes, and all of them have oily faces. They must be eating well, unlike us, who are often in arrears with the military pay. The lives of the commoners will only be harder. One of the soldiers didn't seem to be afraid of Li Lun. After he complained, the other soldiers also started to talk. Although Li Lun was a little angry, he knew that his prestige wasn't enough to make these people shut up. Speaking of which, he was also angry. His wife and children didn't even have enough to eat, which made him, the captain, extremely dispirited. While everyone was sighing and complaining about how they were born in the wrong time, they didn't know that in such a strong sea breeze, Lung Feng had already used the triangular anchor and other equipment to climb up the city wall, which was more than 30 feet tall. Such a city wall might seem very tall to others, but to the members of Lung Feng who often had to climb it, it was just child's play. In less than half an incense's time, a row of 30 vanguard members had all arrived at the top of the city wall. The wind is so strong. Use your guns. Company Commander Xiao Feng, who followed the first batch of members up the city wall, decisively ordered the soldiers to put away their crossbows and switch to their Type 95 submachine guns when he heard the whistling wind. The 30 people's movements were uniform. In just a few seconds, they held their guns in their hands and performed a pre-battle inspection. When the first person raised his right thumb to indicate that the inspection was complete, the other 29 people did the same thing. Everything was done silently and swiftly. It was obvious that this wasn't the first time such a drill was conducted. Xiao Feng observed the performance of the Lung Feng soldiers. He nodded slightly and made a gesture to disperse and surround them. The 30 soldiers immediately moved forward in a fan formation. During this period of time, no one made a single sound. In the dark night, they were like ghosts that appeared and disappeared unpredictably, approaching the small hut on the city tower that could be used as a residence. In the small house, the soldiers were still complaining. As the captain, Li Lun had long shut his mouth and narrowed his eyes. If he had the time to argue, he might as well take a rest. This way, he could eat less tomorrow morning and bring more food back for his children. Sigh, I really don't know when these days will end. Thinking about the current situation, Li Lun, who was sighing in his heart, suddenly heard a sound from the door. Then he stood up with a jolt. He knew that the 20 soldiers in his squad were all in the small house. The only ones who could appear here at this time were either his superior had come to check on them or the enemy had ambushed them. Chapter 78. Li Luan's reaction wasn't slow, but the person's reaction was faster. Before Li Luan could pull out his sword, a black muzzle was already pointed at him. Not only that, there were several black muzzles that were pointed at his subordinates. Don't move, those who surrender will be spared. Those who resist will be killed. A loud voice sounded. It was the voice of the company commander, Xiaofeng. As soon as he finished speaking, bah! A gunshot rang out. One of the Shang dynasty's soldiers clutched his chest and fell to the ground with a look of unwillingness and shock. In his hand, he had already pulled out a long sword and was about to slash forward. One of the Lung Feng soldiers felt the danger and killing intent. Without hesitation, he opened fire and ended the life of the enemy who wanted to resist. The sound of the gunshot was loud and clear in the room, but in the night wind, the sound could not travel far. With one person dead, the room became much quieter. Then the captain, Li Lun, felt that his life was being threatened. He didn't want any of his brothers to die here, so he shouted anxiously, "Listen to me, don't move. Take out your weapons and throw them on the ground. I think that since these people said that they would be spared if they surrendered, they should be true to their words." "That's right, we will keep our promise. The prerequisite is that you guys have to listen to us too. If you guys have any ulterior motives, you will end up like that person." Xiaofeng looked at Li Luan's performance and nodded his head in satisfaction. However, in order to not cause any more problems, he couldn't help but threaten him. When the black muzzle was aimed at him again, Li Luan felt his body tense up. He clearly saw the scene just now. This black metal thing could easily take a person's life. Not wanting to die, he hurriedly threw his sword and scabbard on the ground. At the same time, he covered his head with both hands and squatted down. With Li Luan taking the lead, the other 18 brothers followed suit and threw down their weapons, crouching on the ground with their hands on their heads. "Very good," Xiaofeng praised, then gestured to Lung Feng who was at the side. A few of them took out ropes from their backpacks and tied up all 19 of them, including Li Luan. Just as he was done, the door opened again. A soldier in camouflage uniform walked in. He stood straight and saluted. "Sir, the city gate has been opened by our brothers hiding in the city. 2nd platoon, 3rd platoon, 3rd company, and 1,000 auxiliary soldiers have entered the city. Company Commander Tingshan, may I ask if we can besiege the barracks in the city?" "Yes, everything is going according to plan. Also, tell the brothers that the auxiliary troops are not to participate in the battle. Go and maintain order in the city. As long as the civilians do not cause trouble and stay in their homes, they are not to be harmed." "Most of the people in the city are Han," Xiaofeng replied with a military salute. The soldier who responded with a military salute turned around to pass down the order. Xiaofeng also prepared to bring people to carry out the battle plan. At this moment, Li Luan, who was squatting on the ground, spoke. "Sir, are you the pirates on the other side? Do you have any questions?" Xiaofeng turned around and asked, a sharp look flashing in his eyes. Naturally, he did not like the word pirate. It was only because the 6th young master said that it was not good to expose their strength. Thus, they had no choice but to call themselves pirates. Feeling that Xiaofeng's gaze could kill, Li Luan instinctively lowered his head and avoided it. Then, he said in a small voice, "If you can really not harm the civilians in the city, I am willing to be your guide. There are many of my brothers in the barracks. I think I can help persuade them." Li Lun volunteered himself for 2 reasons. Firstly, he had long lost confidence in the number 1 Shang dynasty. Even the soldiers did not have enough to eat, let alone the common people. Secondly, the weakness of the Shang dynasty made them feel extremely aggrieved. After being surrounded and forbidden from entering the sea, and not being able to send out any ships, they had actually holed themselves up like turtles and refused to move. It was as if they couldn't think of any solution. Instead, they had placed all their hopes on the outside, praying that others would discover their tragic situation and that someone would come to their rescue. This was completely a lucky move. It was no different from spending 2 yuan and waiting for 5 million. The possibility of them being rescued was close to 0. Thirdly, he had just witnessed Lung Feng's prowess. With 1 shot, one of his subordinates was killed. This should be the gun that De Ming was talking about. However, from the looks of it, it seemed to be even more powerful than the gun in the legends. Faced with such a powerful weapon, what could the Shang dynasty use to fight them? Fourthly, although he did not have much contact with them, he had heard some things about these pirates since he was guarding Qishan, which was the closest place to Qichen City. They were completely different from other pirates. They did not bully civilians. When they robbed, they only robbed boats and people. However, they did not kill civilians or merchants. With all these knowledge and after seeing Lung Feng's mental state, Li Lun had the idea of helping them. Not only could he redeem himself, he might even be able to save more of his brothers in the barracks. Li Lun's volunteering naturally made Xiao Feng overjoyed. "Alright, if you do this well, not only can you save more people from the flames of war, you can also save more lives. You can also be considered to have performed a meritorious deed. How about this, untie him and bring him along with us." Li Lun regained his freedom. However, there were 2 Lung Feng beside him so that they could restrain him immediately if he made any strange movements. With Li Lun leading the way, the cold vanguard moved even faster. With the cover provided by the strong wind at night, when the 1st company and the 3rd company, a total of 200 cold vanguards, arrived at the entrance of Qishan military camp, the soldiers there were still not alerted at all. "Rocket launcher team, get ready. Everyone load your guns. If there's any resistance, kill." As soon as they arrived in front of the barracks, Xiao Feng and 3rd Company's Chang Tingshan looked at each other and gave out the order for the battle. In an instant, the 200 people completed their actions silently. Even in the dark, all the Lung Feng's actions of checking their guns were still swift and perfect. All of this made Li Lun's jaw drop. He had been in the army since he was a teenager. He had seen many armies, including some elite ones, but this was the first time he had seen one as outstanding as the one before him. Were these people the celestial soldiers and celestial generals that were mentioned in the books? Why were their actions so uniform? Why didn't the 200 people make any extra noise? At this moment, Li Lun had a feeling that Qishan would definitely be taken down if they were to fight head-on. At the same time, he did not know why he felt his blood boiling. At this moment, he suddenly had the urge to join this army. "Ready," the squad leaders reported softly. As the commander of this battle, Xiao Feng said to Li Lun beside him after seeing that the Lung Feng were ready, "It's up to you now. I can guarantee you that as long as you lay down your weapons and surrender, you can live. On the other hand, no matter what the reason is, if you dare to pick up your weapons and resist, you must die." Understood. Li Lun could tell that this army's combat power was extraordinary. He did not dare to bargain and immediately agreed. Then, an iron loudspeaker appeared in front of him. It was a round loudspeaker. Even without electricity, the loudspeaker could spread the sound better. Holding the loudspeaker, Li Lun's loud voice suddenly rang in the night. "Brothers in the camp, I'm Li Lun, the squad leader of the guards on the wall. You've been surrounded. Lay down your weapons and surrender, and you can live. We're all Hans. 500 years ago, we were one family. Don't be a feudal resistance." His shout was like a clap of thunder in the silent night. It exploded in the entire camp and caused an uproar. For a moment, there were all kinds of curses in the camp. Most of them were cursing to find their uniforms and weapons. The cursing continued for about half a quarter of an hour before it slowly subsided. Then, in the dark, 100-man squad crept toward the wooden fence. It seemed like they wanted to use their advantage of being more familiar with the terrain to launch a counterattack. Ready the rocket launcher. Target the wooden fence. Fire. Xiao Feng had already seen the enemy's every move with his night vision goggles. Night battles were a part of Lung Feng's training. Because of proper nutrition, the ordinary soldiers did not suffer from night blindness. At this moment, they could clearly see the enemy's actions in the opposite camp. The commander gave the order, and immediately, 2 rocket launchers with powerful flames shot forward. After 1.5 seconds, they slammed into the wooden fence that could block the impact of manpower and horsepower. Immediately, flames soared into the sky, and the sound was like thunder. The rocket launcher was a type of infantry anti-tank and siege weapon. It was light and had a short range. At the same time, it could be fired in a straight line, upward, or downward direction. It had a variety of attack methods that were perfect for close-range sieges. The 2 rocket launchers were fired and instantly destroyed the main gate of the camp. The powerful flames and explosive force scared the 100-man vanguard soldiers who wanted to sneak out of the camp. What is this? Is this the wrath of the heavens? This must be the punishment of the heavens. After seeing such powerful firepower, the 100-man vanguard's morale immediately collapsed. In the face of the unknown, humans naturally had a kind of fear, not to mention that it had such great power. Li Luan looked at everything in front of him in a daze. When he saw such powerful firearms, he knew that the soldiers of Qishan's camp had been defeated. He only hesitated for a few seconds before he shouted again, "Brothers, I'm Li Lu. You should have seen the power of these firearms. If you don't want to die, throw down your weapons and surrender. Your families are still waiting for us to return safely in the city." Chapter 79. Under Li Luan's persuasion and the powerful impact of the rocket launcher, some of the smarter soldiers finally realized that they weren't strong enough. The first person threw his weapon to the ground. Then, like a contagious disease, there was a second person, a third person. The frightened soldiers of Qishan threw down the weapons in their hands one by one and then walked out of the military camp in groups. They covered their heads and walked out of the military camp. The entire battle had ended so simply without firing a single shot or firing a single cannon. Of course, this was because of the deterrence of the powerful weapons. However, more importantly, it was because the soldiers of Qishan already had a grudge against the Shang dynasty. They didn't have enough to eat and couldn't wear clothes. Such an army had long lost their morale. How could they be counted on to win the battle? From Li Luan's words, the Qishan military camp had more than 2,000 soldiers. Xiao Feng ordered the auxiliary soldiers who had already entered the city to maintain law and order to take in the captives. At the same time, Qishan city was sealed. Only people were allowed to enter and not leave. The entire city was checked overnight. If there were any dangerous people, they would be killed. However, at the same time, the soldiers were not allowed to harass the commoners. If they were caught, they would be dealt with according to military law. After occupying the city, there had been countless military exercises to maintain peace. Putting them in Qishan city was just turning the exercises into actual battles. However, the soldiers of Lung Feng who had made all kinds of preparations were still very familiar with it. In just a few hours, Qishan city's law and order were restored. There were even some courageous commoners who dared to appear in the morning market to continue trading. When the sun rose, a new 5-starred red flag was placed on the city walls of Qishan city. This meant that from this moment onwards, this place was under Yang Chendong's control. Get someone to inform Captain Gao Xiong of this news. Then pass it on to the 6th young master. At the same time, all platoon leaders and squad leaders will have a meeting to review the battle and point out their own shortcomings. Xiao Feng followed Yang Chendong's training and carried out his work with the mindset that there must be a conclusion after the battle. In conclusion, it was a method that could allow people to grow and become stronger quickly. reality also proved that a big summary after a big battle and a small summary after a small battle could expose more potential problems and point out the correct direction to fight the next battle. In the palace hall, the officials had already arrived at the morning court. Because the emperor had not arrived yet, the officials gathered in 2s and 3s to chat. "Lord Li, did you receive Yang Shima's gift yesterday?" A voice that was not too abrupt came from the crowd. In fact, he was already used to such conversations before every morning court session. "Lord Zhang, what kind of gift is that? Isn't it just toilet paper?" Lord Li shook his head lightly, as if Lord Zhang was making a fuss over nothing. "Hey, there are many ways to use that. If I'm not wrong, you definitely haven't used that thing," Lord Zhang said with a mysterious expression. "Am I useless? Did you use it?" Lord Li's curiosity was piqued by Lord Zhang's words. "Of course, it's all thanks to my wife. When it was delivered, her stomach was not feeling well, so she took it and used it. When she came back, she told you about the wonderful effects of this thing. It was really comfortable and very soft. I didn't believe it, so I used it once. I decided that after that, I'll always use this toilet paper. Not only that, when I'm done with court, I'll send someone to the Yang clan manor to find a Yang Xian horse and get some more," Lord Zhang said as if he had benefited from this experience. It wasn't just Lord Zhang in court. Lord Wang, Lord Sun, Lord Zhou, Lord Wu, and the other officials had all used this benefit and knew of its benefits. The officials who didn't think much of it before were all intrigued by the words of these people. They all decided to go back to their mansions to see what the toilet paper was. They wanted to see if it was better than the wood and bamboo pieces that they usually used. Because of Yang Chendong, the toilet bowl had been introduced first, and the majority of officials in the capital had already started using it. Now, toilet paper had become a complementary product. Although it seemed unremarkable, it was truly the beginning of a new civilization. Not to mention what was said in the morning court. After the court was dismissed, most of the important officials hurried back to their residences. Not long after, the stewards of the various residences boarded their carriages and left the city, heading straight for the Yang clan manor 15 li south of the city. This was because the Yang clan manor had a large number of potatoes, and it was the only one in the Great Ming dynasty. For its safety, the Eastern faction guards and embroidered uniform guards took turns to guard the manor to prevent anyone from causing trouble. When the stewards of the various residences arrived, they were all blocked outside. Left with no choice, they could only pass the visiting cards from their family to Steward Yang Neng and explain their intentions. Regarding this, the new steward Yang Neng had already received instructions from the 6th young master. He cupped his fists and said to the stewards who came forward to ask for toilet paper, "I'm sorry, everyone. My 6th young master said that the toilet paper was shipped from the sea, and the production is limited. Previously, I took out the toilet paper because I thought that it would be better to share it with everyone, but now, I really don't have much left. If everyone really wants it, then wait until the Heavens Beyond trading firm opens for business and buy it there." Yang Ning had a smile on his face. As the saying goes, a slap doesn't hit a smiling face. Since he had already said so, what else could the stewards do? They could only hurriedly return to their residences. Since they didn't have any new goods for a while, they would have to use the toilet paper that was delivered yesterday sparingly. Other than the 1st young master and 1st madam, everyone else could forget about using it. Of course, there were also some officials who thought that Yang Chendong was too stingy. It was just some unremarkable toilet paper, and he wanted to set up a trading firm that they had never heard of to sell it. How much money could that thing be worth? Could he earn back the capital by opening a shop for it? These people's thoughts weren't wrong. After all, toilet paper wasn't something that could be put on the table. Moreover, it wasn't like they couldn't do without it. In the past, when there was no such thing, shouldn't everyone still do what they should do? For something like this, if it was sold at a high price, there probably wouldn't be many people who would buy it. However, if it was sold at a low price, they probably wouldn't even be able to earn back the rent for the shop. That was the normal way of thinking, but how could the people of this era guess what was going on in Yang Chendong's mind? If you said that toilet paper wasn't worth much, there was nothing wrong with that. However, Yang Chendong firmly believed that once people were used to it, They wouldn't be able to adapt to it if you asked them to use wood or bamboo. More importantly, he intended to use hunger marketing to sell it, which meant that he would sell it at a fixed amount a day. Based on the idea that the rarer something was, the more valuable it would be. Once the supply exceeded the demand, the price would naturally rise. When that time came, if other adults used toilet paper, would you still have the nerve to use bamboo? Even if the price was slightly higher, there would still be many people who would rush to buy it. The capital was not like any other place. There were many rich people here, and even more people with authority. Even if the price of toilet paper was a little more expensive, it was still completely acceptable. This would become one of Yang Chendong's tools for making money. Although he couldn't make a huge profit, he would win in the long run. Who residence? Little Qing was lying on a wooden bed with a painful expression. The 2 hits on her buttocks made her feel as if she was about to die. Little Qing, how do you feel? Does it hurt? With a face full of tears, Hu Yen at this moment made people truly understand what it meant to say that women were made of water. Ever since they returned to the courtyard last night and little Qing was beaten twice, she had been crying nonstop. Even after a night had passed, her tears still flowed out uncontrollably. She really didn't know where her tears came from. Miss, don't cry. Your eyes are swollen. It's so ugly. Resisting the pain on her but, little Qing, who felt sorry for Hu Yen, squeezed out a smile and said, the miss was the master, and the maid was the servant. In this hierarchical feudal society, little Qing still dared to make fun of her miss like this. It could be seen that the relationship between the two was really good to a certain extent. I don't care. I don't care if it's ugly. I just want to cry. I want to cry for my father to see how hard he hit me. Hu Yen shook her head vigorously, looking very wronged. But miss, the Lord has already hit me. It's useless even if you cry. It's better to find some medicine for little Qing to apply to the wound. Little Qing shook her head helplessly. Her miss was really cute at this time, but her butt was really painful. Do I need to apply medicine? Little Qing, is it very painful? Don't worry, I'll go out and find medicine. Hu Yen also got up at this moment, then wiped the tears on the corner of her eyes with her sleeve, and then strode out of the room. Outside the Mrs. Courtyard, Hu Zhangning gave Hu Yen a confinement order, and Lieutenant Gao Sheng was guarding here. When she came out, she just saw Gao Sheng dressed in a brocade guard uniform, and Hu Yen was angry. She thought that it was this person who complained and caused her, little Qing, and Lieutenant Sun Chuang to suffer. Mississippi, as soon as he saw Hu Yen come out, Gao Sheng straightened his chest and greeted her. Although he knew that what he did was arranged by the Lord, it was a fact that he had offended the miss. As soon as Hu Yen walked to the front of the courtyard, she deliberately pretended to be very angry and looked at Gao Sheng. But perhaps this gaze was too weak. Gao Sheng's expression did not change, and he still looked neither servile nor overbearing. Do you have injury medicine? Hu Yen, who wanted to be angry and ignore Gao Sheng, soon couldn't bear it. Thinking of little Qing who was in pain in the room, she had to lower her head. Yes. Hearing that she was not going to question him, but wanted injury medicine, Gao Sheng immediately took out a porcelain bottle from his arms and handed it over. Use the amount of medicine to cover the wound 3 times a day. Chapter 80. Reaching out to take the porcelain bottle, Hu Yen angrily turned around and left without even saying a word of thanks. Gao Sheng seemed to be used to being treated like this. He just smiled and stood there again. At this time, a cough suddenly sounded behind him. He turned around vigilantly. After seeing the person, he hurriedly bowed respectfully and said, Sir. Why did Miss look for you just now? The person who came was Hu Zhangning. At this time, he had a constipated expression. After the morning court, he was called by his mother, Hu Yushi, to find a way to get some toilet paper. At this moment, Hu Zhangning was stumped. It turned out that after the Yang family sent the toilet paper yesterday, Hu Wangshi, who was in charge of the backyard, was going to put it in the family's warehouse. However, Hu Yen, who was rushing over, took it away. Then she used it and the effect was really good. She gave the rest of the things to her mother and grandmother, Hu Yushi. With the recommendation of her granddaughter, Hu Yushi had people verify the magical effect of this thing. Then, she sent the rest of the toilet paper to her relatives in the city. This was also the old lady's style of doing things. Perhaps because of her humble background, Hu Yushi had always valued her relatives very much. Once there was something good, she would immediately send it over. The toilet paper was the same. Except for a small packet, the rest were sent away. Hu Yan came back from the morning court and asked the old lady about the toilet paper. The old lady, who had no stock, had to give the task to her son. She also said that she wanted to get some more. There were still some relatives who had not shared it. In Hu Yushi's eyes, her son was the guardian of the genie guards. There was nothing that could be difficult for him. After Hu Zhangning received the task, he was not in a hurry. He sent the housekeeper of the house to the Yang family village 15 miles south of the city to ask for it. Unexpectedly, he returned empty-handed. According to the housekeeper, not only the Hu family, but many ministers in the court also sent their housekeepers, but they did not bring back a packet of toilet paper. Hu Zhangning, who had already promised his mother, was a little anxious. Thinking that the toilet paper was given to the old lady by his daughter, she should have some stock in her hands. He had to bite the bullet and come to the door. If it was in the past, Hu Zhangning guaranteed that his daughter would agree to such a thing. The relationship between father and daughter had always been very good. But this time, he had no confidence in his heart. He had just punished the other party yesterday, so he wasn't very confident in speaking up now. Even though he wasn't sure, Hu Zhangning, who had always been extremely filial, still decided to give it a try. He couldn't let his mother down. While Hu Zhangning was still thinking about what to say, Gao Sheng, who was standing in front of him, had already answered, "Sir, Miss asked me for injury medicine." Injury medicine? Was little Qing seriously injured? It's just 2 military rods. Hu Zhangning said nonchalantly. When Gao Sheng heard this, he couldn't help but think in his heart. 2 strikes from the military rod might not be much to a soldier, but for Xiao Qing, who had tender skin and was greatly cared for by the young miss, that was already a very heavy punishment. He thought this in his heart, but he could not say it out loud. He could only say with a serious expression, "This is the first time that Maid Xiao Qing has been beaten by the military." In addition, these 2 beatings were not exaggerated at all. It is inevitable that she will be injured. What? Was there no water at all? I say, you are also right. She is a maid, not a thick-skinned soldier like you. How can she be treated equally? Hu Zhangning pretended to be very angry and reprimanded Gao Sheng. Then he said casually, "Okay, I will go in and take a look." He strode into the young miss courtyard. Looking at Hu Zhangning's departing figure, Gao Sheng was stunned in place. How could he not be treated equally? If these 2 beatings were exaggerated and didn't hurt or itch, he was afraid that when he returned, he would be accused of favoritism. This job was really not easy to do. Hu Zhangning strode into Hu Yan's courtyard. Before he even entered, he called out loudly, "Is Yan here? Father is coming in." As soon as he shouted, Hu Yan, whose face was still filled with anger, had already walked out of the main door. "Of course your daughter is here. Where can a grounded person go?" "Ha!" Hu Zhangning smiled awkwardly when he heard the obvious hidden meaning in her words. Then he stretched his neck and glanced into the room. "Is your maid Xiaoqing all right?" "All right? She won't die for the time being." Hu Yan's answer was still cold. This time, she was really disappointed in her father. It was true that she had done something wrong, and she deserved to be grounded. However, he shouldn't have hit little Qing so hard. There was a lot of blood on her, but she cried for the whole night and was still in a trance at this time. As soon as he heard the words, "won't die," Hu Zhangning knew that his daughter was still angry with him. But as a father, how could he simply apologize? Thinking that if he continued, there might be more sarcastic remarks waiting for him, he simply did not ask any more. Instead, he asked straightforwardly, "Yan, father wants to ask you, do you still have the toilet paper that the Yang family sent yesterday?" If it were any other time, Hu Yan would definitely ask why, but now she was angry and turned around to leave without thinking. After a while, when she came back, she put a small packet of untouched toilet paper into Hu Zhangning's hand. Don't tell me there's only this much? Looking at the packet in his hand, Hu Zhangning felt that things were going to be bad. Daughter kept a total of 2 small packets and gave the rest to mother and grandmother. What? Father, are you going to take that half packet too? Hu Yan was really angry at this time. She thought that this was simply her father taking revenge on her. Because she made him angry, now he didn't even let her use the toilet paper and wanted to give it all away. Hu Zhangning heard the resentment in his daughter's voice and knew that if he didn't explain, it was likely to become a knot between the father and daughter. So he explained the matter again. It's not that father wants it, but Yan knows your grandmother. Whenever she has something good, she must give it to her relatives. See, when the toilet paper came, she gave it all away, but it was still not enough, so she called father and asked me to think of a way. But the housekeeper of the house went to Xianxia village. The housekeeper of the 6th young master said that the things were shipped from the sea and were not products of our great Ming dynasty. Now he doesn't have any stock in his hands. If he wants it, he can wait until the Heavens Beyond Trading Company opens and buy it there. But your grandmother is an impatient person. How can she wait for so long? After saying this, Hu Zhangning spread his hands, indicating that he was helpless. Originally, Hu Yan was prepared to ignore her father, but when the matter involved Yang Chendong, she forgot the decision in her heart. The 6th young master doesn't have it? If not, why did he give it to every family yesterday? This doesn't make sense. Yes, if you say that the 6th young master doesn't have it at all, no one will believe it. But thinking about it, there shouldn't be much left, so it should be true. Otherwise, he wouldn't have embarrassed so many officials. But since he did this, the idea of getting the toilet paper from there is very small. Hu Zhangning said as he shook his head. After hearing her father's analysis, Hu Yan didn't have the same opinion. Instead, she said seriously, since the 6th young master has it, as long as the people sent out are suitable, they can definitely get some. Why don't I go? She had always wanted to see what Yang Chendong looked like, but she didn't have the chance. Wasn't now the right time? She was going to get toilet paper for her grandmother, which was a show of filial piety. Even if others knew, they couldn't blame her. Originally, Hu Zhangning was still worried about this matter. His identity as a butler was not easy to use. Did he have to go personally? If he wanted to come, it would be fine, but if he didn't, wouldn't he lose face? Hu Zhangning really didn't have a better way to deal with Yang Chendong. He had just made a great contribution, and the potatoes hadn't ripened yet. Who could force him to do things? Using martial arts to subdue people, how powerful was that young heir beside him? He was definitely not a match for him. If he couldn't do it, Hu Zhangning had no other way. But now that he heard that his daughter was going personally, his eyes lit up. Yes, his daughter was a child. It would be best if she came, but even if she didn't, it wouldn't be a big deal. But the only thing was that his daughter wasn't married yet. If word got out that she was so ostentatious, it would be bad for her reputation. Hu Zhangning didn't reject her immediately. Instead, he looked like he was deep in thought, which made Hu Yan see hope. Father, just let me go. I promise that after I go, as long as there is a little bit of toilet paper left in Xianxia village, I will get it for you. Oh right, I won't go alone. I'll ask Sister Yang Qi to go with me as a companion. I think outsiders won't be able to say anything. Sister Yang Qi, are you talking about Yang Duo heir who married Wang Go? Hu Zhangning immediately mentioned the situation of the Yang family's 7th sister. In the past, Hu Zhangning wouldn't have known about a daughter of the Yang family. But ever since Yang Chendong appeared, Yang Duo heir had become a celebrity and a woman that everyone knew. Yes, it's her, Hu Yan said proudly. Yang Duo heir hasn't been to the Yang village yet? This time, it's only right for me to accompany her back. When the 6th young master sees his 7th sister and is happy, won't he give me whatever I want? Hu Yan said proudly, but in her heart, she was thinking that since it was her first time meeting Yang Chendong, she should at least bring some greeting gifts. So, she set her sights on Yang Duo heir. Hu Zhangning thought about the feasibility of this matter. Indeed, with such a reason, Yang Chendong would have a good impression of her and the chances of her getting toilet paper would increase a lot. But then his gaze fell on his daughter again, looking at her with a faint smile. The 100 people replied in unison. Young master, Tiger's mane suddenly appeared and half knelt in front of Yang Chendong. Seventh young mistress is here. Seventh sister? Yang Chendong's face showed a gentle expression. It was completely different from when he was lecturing the 100 people. Seventh sister is not an outsider. Invite her here. She might be in a better mood if she sees the children. Yes. Young master, Miss Xiang has been waiting outside the manor for 4 hours. What do you think? Tiger's mane did not leave immediately. Instead, he lowered his head and continued to report. Tell her that I have something to do today. I'll see her another day. Yang Chendong waved his hand. Since Miss Xiang was late to find out, she had to pay the price. After understanding Yang Chendong's intention, Tiger's mane stood up and left. Outside the manor, Yang Duo sat in the carriage with a gloomy face. She had a snow-white oval face and a pair of black eyes under her slender eyebrows. However, there was no light in her eyes. Instead, there was a hint of sadness. Once upon a time, Yang Duo was the apple of the Yang family's eye. Because she was the youngest daughter, she was doted on by her parents. When Yang Rong was studying in the study, he was willing to hold this youngest daughter in his arms. That was also the best time of Yang Duo's life. She never had anything to worry about. She could eat delicious food and wear the most beautiful clothes every day. However, everything changed with her father's death. After Yang Rong's death, Yang Duo only felt that the mountain she relied on collapsed. The world in her eyes also lost its former glory. It was as if the entire family changed at that moment. Her brothers and sisters were busy with their own things. Even her only mother had no time to care about other things because of her poor health. It was as if she was forced to grow up overnight. Yang Duo was no longer the little girl who was willing to joke. She became silent. Until she grew up and married Wang Go. Although this marriage did not seem to be blessed by the Yang family, in Yang Duo's eyes, Wang Go was a man who relied on his own struggles to grow up. He should be better than her brothers and sisters who relied on their birth. He should know how to work hard and know how to cherish everything that was hard to come by. When they first got married, the days were barely passable. The relationship between husband and wife was harmonious, but as the influence of the Yang family weakened, her status in the Wang family also declined day by day. In addition, the things she knew were too few, so in the end, she was reduced to the point where the maids in the residence dared to give her a hard time and bully her. At this moment, Yang Duo missed her father's wide embrace. However, she knew that everything was gone and could not be returned. In the most bitter days, Yang Duo even thought of dying. However, when she thought of how she would explain to her parents in the afterlife if she died like this, she could only force herself to live on. She hoped that one day, Wang Go would change his mind or someone in the Yang family could revive their glory. This was the sorrow of a woman in a feudal society. Everything had to rely on others. It was extremely difficult to rely on oneself to change anything. Fortunately, a life that should have been hopeless had a comprehensive change because of Yang Dong's unexpected arrival. That morning, the moment Yang Chendong kicked open the Wang family's door, Yang Duo's fate also changed. Her husband and mother-in-law being beaten made them start to face themselves again. At least in these few days, she slowly felt that her dignity was respected again. Although this respect was only on the surface, Yang Duo was still full of hope in her heart. Today, Hu Yan's sudden appearance, accompanied by the captain of the brocade guard, was to invite her back to the Yang family manor. In this regard, Wang Go did not dare to have the slightest objection. He even forced out a smile and said that if she wanted, she could stay at her maternal home for a few more days. Feeling that Wang Go was not concerned but afraid, Yang Duo's heart was filled with mixed feelings. What made her even more afraid was how to face her seventh brother. The person who would only follow behind her when they were young and whom she despised had finally grown up. Not only that, he seemed to be even more outstanding than her brothers. When she thought of the heroic aura that her sixth brother exuded when he kicked open the Wang family's door that morning, Yang Duo blushed with shame and did not dare to meet him. This was also why after a few days, she still did not come to the Yang family manor to take a look. In the carriage, Yang Duo was very nervous, which made Hu Yan, who should have been nervous, relax a lot. She began to comfort young Duo. Sister Duo the sixth young master is your brother and is so nervous about you. What are you afraid of? Listen to your younger sister. When you see him, you should reprimand him first to suppress his imposing manner. Hu Yen thought of Yang Chendong being scolded and not daring to talk back, and couldn't help but giggle. Scold sixth brother? Also, what should I scold him for? Yang Duo's face was filled with confusion. Clearly, she did not understand what Hu Yen meant. Hu Yen put her finger to her mouth and rolled her eyes. Suddenly, she said in surprise, scold him for beating your husband and mother-in-law. Let him give you an explanation. In short, you have to shock him first and let him know how powerful you are. Hu Yan's idea made Yang Duo shake her head and say, I'm not powerful. Otherwise, I wouldn't have suffered such a big loss in the Wang family. Forget it, I'd better not scold sixth brother. He beat the imperial court officials for me. He took a great risk. Hu Yen slowly closed her mouth. She knew that it was impossible to see Yang Chendong suffer. Seventh young lady, the young master invites you in. Outside, Hu Meng arrived in front of the carriage. He signaled Yang Lu with his eyes, and Yang Lu replaced the original coachman. Gao Sheng was also sent far away. Yang Lu then drove the carriage into the Yang clan manor. The East faction protector, who was standing nearby, saw that the carriage was driven by the Yang family servant, so he did not come up to check. After a few days of contact, the two sides had a tacit understanding. The East faction protector and the genie guard would not take the initiative to trouble the Yang family. The Yang family's servants also followed the rules. All the carriages that came here were checked by those people, except for the Yang family's carriages. In Yang Chendong's words, this was the Yang family manor. Did the Yang family need to check their own home? What was the reason? For this matter, the East faction protector also reported the matter to Wang Zhen, but the answer he got was that since the sixth young master said so, he would do as he said. The carriage smoothly drove into the Yang family manor. Through the curtain of the carriage, Hu Yen looked out curiously. However, it didn't seem to be any different from the other manors, which made her feel a little disappointed. It was not until the carriage drove into the square in the backyard of the Yang family manor that the scene in front of her changed. She saw 100 boys and girls wearing clothes that she had never seen before standing under the scorching sun, motionless. God! The clothes they wear are so beautiful. Hu Yan's gaze was deeply attracted by the scene in front of her as she spoke like a love-struck fool. Chapter 82. Yang Duo, on the other hand, was extremely nervous. She didn't know what to say when she saw Yang Chendong. She thought that her actions had already lost face for the Yang family. She wasn't mentally prepared yet. The carriage finally stopped, not far from Yang Chendong. From here, one could clearly see Yang Chendong, dressed in green, sitting under a parasol, leisurely drinking tea. From time to time, he would look at the scene. Whenever he found someone slacking while standing, he would shout from afar. Every time this happened, the person who was shouted would straighten their body, as if their entire appearance had changed in an instant. Stop! Yang Chendong's attention was drawn to the carriage when Yang Lu shouted for it to stop. Then he came over with a smile on his face. As he walked, he said, "Seventh sister, I missed you so much." As he spoke, Yang Chendong had already arrived in front of the carriage. Then, he reached out his hand and lifted the curtain of the carriage. Then, he smiled and reached out his hand to touch the person in the carriage. This was originally Yang Chendong's way of welcoming seventh sister. He hoped that a joke would make her relax. How could the meticulous sixth young master not know that seventh sister must have had a hard time in the Wang family all these years? She had probably developed a habit of being cautious. Welcoming her in such a joking way was to make her relax. But he never thought that his hand would reach out and grab the person. But why did this person look so unfamiliar? Her skin was whiter than snow, and her eyes were like a pool of clear water. When she looked around, she had an elegant and noble temperament. Her eyes were very big, and her eyelashes were very long. At this moment, she was blinking and looking at him. That cute and chubby little face was as red as an apple. In fact, Hu Yan really did not expect this to happen. At this time, she was also frightened by the scene in front of her. When a pair of big hands were stuck under her armpits, her beautiful face had already turned pale at this moment. Shua! Yang Chendong's reaction was not slow. When he felt that he had grabbed the wrong person, he quickly retracted his hand and immediately bowed his head to apologize. "I'm sorry, Mississippi. I thought it was my seventh sister." A timid voice sounded. Yang Duo popped her head out from behind Hu Yan, who was still in a panic. "Sixth brother, this is Miss Hu Yan, Lord Hu Zhangning's daughter." As if she felt the awkward atmosphere, Yang Duo hurriedly introduced Hu Yan's identity. Hearing seven sisters say that this girl was Hu Yan, Yang Chendong could not help sizing her up a few more times. She was indeed a great beauty. In terms of looks, she was similar to Zhao Liang, but her body was more voluptuous. "So it's Miss Hu. My apologies." Yang Chendong's reaction was fast. After knowing Hu Yan's identity, he immediately changed into a polite appearance, making people unable to get angry even if they wanted to. Yang Chendong took the initiative to apologize, which made Hu Yan a little embarrassed. She really didn't mean it. In addition, she had been educated since she was young. No matter what, she was still a daughter of a noble family. Of course, it was not good for her to blame the other party for such a thing. Hu Yan's face was red like the sunset. She softly said, "Hello, sixth young master." "Hello, hello." Yang Chendong quickly returned to normal. After answering with a smile, he reached out and helped Yang Duo, who had already squeezed forward, get off the carriage. As for Hu Yan, Yang Chendong did not want to offend her. He reached out and took the stool handed over by Yang Lu, allowing her to smoothly walk down by herself. Yang Duo did not pay attention to Hu Yan's change. She had been chirping like a lark in the car just now, but now she was as quiet as a thrush and didn't say a word. Most of her attention was on her sixth brother, Yang Chendong. With Yang Chendong holding her hand, she heard her sixth brother's voice. "Seventh sister, these people are the people I've trained to serve the immortal abode in the future. In other words, they are the waiters in the wine shop. Do you see the clothes those girls are wearing? I call them kipeos. They are the best clothes to show off a woman's perfect figure. The other big sisters in the family have all tried them on before. Why don't you find one and change into it too? A beautiful set of clothes can change a person's mood at any time." Yang Chendong didn't ask Yang Duo what she meant. He reached out and called Xiao Yin over. "Yin, bring my seventh sister to change into a qipao." "Young master, what about that Miss Hu?" Xiao Yin looked at Hu Yan, who seemed to have been left out. "If Miss Hu is willing, she can also try on a qipao. There are many different types and colors prepared. Just treat it as my apology for my earlier rudeness." Yang Chendong chuckled and turned to look at Hu Yan. On the way, Hu Yan had been teaching Yang Duo to be more generous. She had even told her to teach Yang Chendong a lesson and show him who was boss. However, when she saw the real person, she immediately softened. Yang Duo acted as if she had returned home. She didn't even wait for Hu Yan to say whether she agreed or not before grabbing her. "Come, let's go take a look at those kipeos. Let's see if they are really as beautiful as they seem." Three women made a show. Xiao Yin, Yang Duo, and Hu Yan all walked towards the rear courtyard. Yang Chendong smiled as he watched the three leave. When they were no longer in sight, he turned around. Tiger's Mane and Yang Lu were already half kneeling on the ground. "Didn't you check the carriage before?" Clearly, Yang Chendong was reprimanding them for their earlier rudeness to Hu Yan. It is this subordinate's dereliction of duty. I originally thought that since it was Miss Seven's carriage, there was no need to check it. Tiger's Mane lowered his head. He knew that he had really made a mistake this time. Fortunately, it was Miss Hu Yan who came. If it was an assassin, the sixth young master would have been in danger. The Yang clan was his own family. There was no need to check. This was Yang Chendong's previous order. There was nothing wrong with them following orders. For a moment, the sixth young master couldn't punish them. He could only shake his head and say, "Forget it. This won't happen again. In the future, we still have to check the carriage." At the very least, we can't let any bad people sneak in. Also, have you prepared the people I asked you to prepare to serve Miss Seven? They are ready. They are in the rear courtyard. I'll tell them to get ready immediately. Tiger's mane knew that this matter was over. However, he definitely couldn't be so careless next time. Go and tell them to get ready. Yang Chendong nodded. Then, as if he had thought of something, he asked, "That's right. Do you know why Miss Hu Yen came here?" From the information he received from the Security Bureau, he already knew that Hu Yen was paying attention to him. Yang Chendong narcissistically thought that the other party probably had a good impression of him. However, even if she had a good impression of him, it was impossible for her to directly come to his door. At that time, girls weren't that open. This was especially true for young ladies of noble families. They were extremely reserved. I don't know. Tiger's mane shook his head. Although the capital's Security Bureau's capabilities were constantly increasing after investing a large amount of money, he still didn't know what had just happened to the Hu clan. Forget it. Let's go. With the idea of taking things one step at a time, Yang Chendong had Tiger's mane and the others leave. As for himself, he returned to the large umbrella. His gaze fell on the 100 young men and women who were still practicing their stances in the distance. In the fitting room in the backyard, Xiao Yin and the other 2 women were currently seriously choosing the most suitable qipao for them. Among the 3, it wasn't Xiao Yin's first time in this room. She was also the first to choose. It was a set of sapphire blue qipao that represented purity. When paired with her petite face, it appeared very cute. Yang Duo chose a yellow qipao with golden edges. She was tall to begin with, so wearing it on her slim body made her look even more elegant. Hu Yen took the longest time to choose. In her eyes, it seemed that every one of them was very beautiful. In front of her were beautiful clothes that she had never seen before. In the end, she still chose a white qipao. This was a color that went with all kinds of colors. When worn, it gave off a pure and flawless color that didn't even have a speck of dust. In the fitting room, there were several mirrors that were said to be divine objects in the palace. It was very good for them to see their own style through these mirrors. Of course, these mirrors couldn't be leaked out yet. Xiao Yin also explained this point to the 2 women. Otherwise, the mirrors in the palace wouldn't seem so noble and mysterious. However, Xiao Yin also said that mirrors like these would be circulated in the market in the future. It was just that there wouldn't be a lot of them. In accordance with the principle of rare things being valuable, this would show off their nobility. As for the mirrors, the 2 women only looked at them curiously. If it was any other time, perhaps they would be attracted. However, right now, their attention was completely diverted by the qipao on their bodies. Right now, they were looking at themselves as if they had just met each other. In their minds, they never thought that one day they would be so beautiful. To say something narcissistic, at this moment, even they were attracted to themselves. All right. Seeing Hu Yen and Yang Duo spin in front of the mirrors who knew how many times, Xiao Yin smiled like a flower and said, "The ugly daughter-in-law will have to see her parents-in-law sooner or later. Let's let the young master take a look and let him give his opinion." The young master said that women wear beautiful clothes for others to see. As a man, his opinion will be more pertinent. Therefore, they have more authority and qualifications to judge. These words caused Hu Yen to immediately cover her mouth and chuckle. The Dong Shui is really something. He clearly wants to take advantage of others, yet he still makes the reason sound so dignified. Could it be that Miss Hu is afraid of letting the young master see your current appearance? As a woman, Xiao Yin had long felt that Hu Yen looked at the young master differently. However, she was already prepared to share the young master with others. Furthermore, with her status, she would be very happy if she could be a bed-warming maid in the future. Naturally, she didn't have the authority to be jealous of others. Chapter 83. Why would I be scared? Let's see then. Hu Yen seemed to be throwing a tantrum as she spoke, but she was probably the only one who knew what she was really thinking. She really wanted to see what kind of expression Yang Chendong would have when he saw her in this white qipao. In the backyard, the the 100 young men and women had already switched to walking. A paper bowl was placed on top of each of their heads. In Yang Chendong's words, they had to keep the upper half of their bodies steady while walking. They absolutely couldn't allow their paper bowls to fall. If they did, they would be punished with standing for an extra hour and no meat for dinner. It wasn't a heavy punishment, but none of the 100 future employees of the Immortal abode wanted to be punished. They didn't know if they would be disqualified if they were punished too many times. If that was the case, they would have to return to their old lives. They could only eat 2 meals a day, and they weren't even full. Here, they could eat 3 meals a day, and there was meat for every meal. They had new clothes to wear, and they even had a monthly salary. Originally, Yang Chendong was staring at the crowd and pointing out their mistakes. However, when 3 graceful figures suddenly appeared in his peripheral vision, Yang Chendong was completely unable to remain calm. In his line of sight, the 3 beauties were like fairies descending to the mortal world as they walked towards him one by one. This caused his heartbeat to accelerate, and his face began to heat up. Even his gaze became infatuated. Seeing Yang Chendong's dazed expression, the 3 girls couldn't help but feel amused. In the end, it was Xiao Yin, who was the closest to him, who slowly walked up and whispered into his ear, "Young master, you're almost drooling." But Yang Chendong, who had lost his composure, hurriedly raised his hand to wipe his mouth. However, how could he wipe anything? Only then did he realize that Xiao Yin was teasing him. He couldn't help but awkwardly say, "You're being naughty again." When she saw that Yang Chendong really was wiping his mouth, Xiao Yin skipped away with a smile. This scene also caused Yang Duo and Hu Yen to cover their mouths and laugh. "You actually dare to laugh at this young master? In order to punish you all, someone come and serve me with a brush." Yang Chendong saw that the 3 women were so beautiful, and each of them had an extraordinary temperament. It really felt like 100 flowers were blooming, and he had the idea of painting them as a memento. After Yang Chendong shouted, Tiger's mane had already turned around and disappeared. When he reappeared, he was holding a wooden frame in his hands. That was the so-called easel that the 6th young master had requested. Does Yang Chendong know how to draw? Naturally, the answer was yes. As an outstanding member of the Wolf's Fong External Operations team, drawing was a skill that must be mastered. Among them, he was best at sketching. The so-called easel was prepared according to the standard of sketching. When the easel was placed there, Yang Chendong took out a hard pencil from the warehouse and had Xiao Yin stand in front of him. Then he began to draw. After a few strokes, a rough outline appeared on the paper. This was the first time Xiao Yin had seen the young master draw. Out of absolute trust, she stood there without moving. On the other hand, Yang Duo and Hu Yen, who had nothing to do for the time being, came up to join in on the fun. When the 2 arrived in front of the easel and looked down, their originally playful expressions immediately turned into incomparable astonishment. With just a few strokes, an undulating and curving line was outlined. After the shape, structure, characteristics, rhythm, and charm were displayed one by one, Xiao Yin seemed to come alive on the paper. What kind of drawing technique is this? Yang Duo and Xiao Yin both had extremely astonished expressions. They were both daughters of noble families and were all descendants of famous families. They understood drawing techniques and were even quite good at it. It was because of this that they were even more astonished by the ability that Yang Chendong displayed. I call it sketching. Yang Chendong raised his head slightly and gave the 2 girls a charming smile. Then he continued to draw and complete the rest of his work. From start to finish, it took only half the time it took to drink a cup of tea. The sketch was completed and Xiao Yin was vividly engraved on the paper. Yang Chendong stopped and nodded. "Not bad. You didn't lose your skill." "That's it." "So beautiful." The 2 women saw that the painting had been completed in such a short period of time. Moreover, the painting was so accurate that Xiao Yin's most beautiful side was fully displayed. Aside from the lack of color, everything else that should be displayed was displayed. This caused them to make a fuss over nothing. Yang Chendong had heard a lot of compliments recently, so he didn't have much of a reaction. He just smiled at the 2 and asked, "Which one of you will go first?" We can be drawn to? Hu Yen pointed her slender finger at herself in surprise. Originally, she thought that Yang Chendong could draw Xiao Yin so quickly because they understood each other. That was why he could draw so skillfully. However, this was the first time they had met. Of course, if you refuse, I won't force you. Yang Chendong showed a sincere smile again. He didn't want to force people to do things. I won't refuse. Then draw me first. When Hu Yen heard that she could also receive such treatment, she was instantly overjoyed. Then, she walked to where Xiao Yin was standing and stood with her chest puffed out. Don't be so stiff. Act more naturally. Yang Chendong chuckled when he saw that Hu Yan's entire body seemed to have been filled with lead, resembling a zombie that had lost a portion of her spiritual energy. Oh! Hu Yen, who was extremely obedient, quickly relaxed her body. It was also at that moment that she heard Yang Chendong's voice. Very good. That's it. Don't move. It'll be done soon. Yang Chendong seemed to have found an excellent angle and began to paint with great vigor. In just the time it took to drink a cup of tea, Yang Chendong finished the last stroke and laughed. It's done. He finished drawing just like that? With a trace of suspicion, Hu Yen walked over. However, at this moment, Yang Chendong had already begun to draw for seventh sister, Yang Duo. Hu Yen walked over and looked at the drawing of her face and expression that had been placed to the side. The lines were so beautiful and the curves of her body were so real. It was as if they were lifelike. Her charm, cuteness, and beauty were completely reflected on the paper. At this moment, she felt a little intoxicated. Thinking that the two of them had only met for the first time, how could he understand her so clearly in such a short period of time? Hu Yen couldn't help but look up. She wanted to see the appearance of this man. She wanted to understand him and imprint him deeply in her mind. When she looked up, she saw the scene of Yang Chendong seriously drawing for seventh sister. People say that people who work seriously are the most beautiful because at that time, their whole body is focused and full of charm. When she looked up, she saw this scene. The corners of his mouth slightly curled up, the confident light in his eyes, and the fact that he was able to write as fast as lightning while remaining calm as usual, coupled with his resolute face and bright eyes, all of these attracted Hu Yen. At this moment, she felt as if there was a little rabbit in her arms that was jumping wildly. Done. With a wave of his hand, Yang Chendong, who finished the last stroke, laughed and said that it was done. He put down the hard pencil in his hand. Yang Duo couldn't wait any longer. She ran a few steps and came in front of her portrait. Immediately, she looked like she was in a daze. People say that the person who understands you the most is yourself. But this time, Yang Duo felt that this seemed to be wrong. Because from the painting, she seemed to be seeing herself for the first time. It turned out that she was so beautiful. She wasn't the useless stupid girl that the Wang family said was even worse than a servant girl. Yang Duo stood there in a daze. After a while, tears flowed down from the corners of her eyes. Yang Chendong's heart softened as he looked at her. He stood up and went forward to hug seventh sister in his arms. The painting is to show your most beautiful side and preserve it for later memories. But what we should do is to cherish the present, cherish our youth, your beauty, and all the good things we have. Seventh sister, if life in the Wang family is not happy, then leave there. Believe in sixth brother, I will let Wang go divorce you. There won't be any bad memories left. It was the most basic common sense to persuade people to reconcile and not to divorce. But now, Yang Chendong was indeed persuading his seventh sister to leave her husband's family. In modern terms, it was divorce. But when Hu Yen and Xiao Yin heard this, they felt that the sixth young master was right. It wasn't abrupt at all, and it wasn't annoying at all. Seventh sister in his arms was clearly moved, but in the end, she clenched her teeth and shook her head. Sixth brother, I still want to try. Can you give me a bit more time? Yes, seventh sister will make the decision. Sixth brother just wants to tell you that no matter when, no matter what decision you make, sixth brother will support you unconditionally. Because in sixth brother's eyes, seventh sister will always be the best and most beautiful girl. As for the others, they can think whatever they want and see whatever they want. Even if Butcher Zhang dies, I won't eat that pig with hair. The originally very warm scene was indeed because of Yang Chendong's last proverb that broke the mood. For a moment, the three women all laughed out loud, and the atmosphere at the scene also became a lot more harmonious because of this sentence. The three girls each held the painting with their own picture in their hands. They loved it so much that if anyone wanted to snatch it from them, there would be a fierce struggle. Next, with the company of the three goddess-like women, Yang Chendong felt that life was extremely comfortable. Even time seemed to pass very quickly. What's wrong? It was already time for lunch. He brought the three girls, who had changed back to their original clothes, to the front of the crop field. The four of them personally plucked several stalks of potatoes, about 40 to 50 caddies. It was the first time the three girls had done something like this. Naturally, they were very happy and couldn't stop smiling. On the other hand, the East faction guards who were in charge of watching over them were very distressed. Chapter 84. Their duty was to guard this place. Without orders from above, no one was allowed to casually approach this place and pick the fruits. However, the orders given by the higher-ups depended on the person involved. For example, Yang Chendong, the discoverer and cultivator, was definitely not an exception. The fields here all belonged to the Yang family, so of course he could do whatever he wanted. As long as it was not a large-scale harvest, even the people of the East faction guards had no right to interfere. Each of the girls carried the freshly dug potatoes and returned to the kitchen with Yang Chendong. Each yoer had already prepared everything they needed. Soon the aroma spread. At noon, the four of them ate until their stomachs were round and full. They were extremely satisfied. You have to learn to share. Good things can't be eaten by yourself. When you leave, each of you bring some for your family to taste. Yang Chendong smiled as he looked at Yang Duo and Hu Yen. Seeing how they looked as if their bellies were about to burst, he couldn't help but stretch out his right hand and lightly scratch the tips of their noses. This was originally Yang Chendong's habitual action. In the past, he often played like this with Xiao Yin. However, this time, he was facing seventh sister Yang Duo and Hu Yen, who he had just met for the first time. Yang Duo was slightly better. She just treated it as her brother joking with her. However, Hu Yan's face immediately flushed red after being scratched. This seemingly habitual action by Yang Chendong was actually very intimate and flirtatious in her eyes. Only after he scratched her nose did Yang Chendong feel that his actions were somewhat inappropriate. However, the matter had already been done. It was too late to apologize. Instead, it would destroy this beautiful atmosphere. He immediately clapped his hands and said, "Sister Chioa, bring a few of the drinks that we prepared beforehand." Each yoer complied. Then, a few servants carried a few transparent cups and placed them on the table. The cups were transparent glasses from the future. There were a few drinks that had already been prepared. The moment the things were placed on the table, other than Xiao Yin, who had already seen the transparent glass, Hu Yen and Yang Duo were once again shocked by the things in front of them. They realized that as long as they stayed in the Yang manner, there would always be all kinds of surprises waiting for them, and they were all existences that were far beyond their imagination. Don't just stare at the glass. Why don't you try this drink? Yang Chendong smiled as he looked at the shocked duo. You call this a glass? So exquisite, so beautiful. Hu Yen couldn't help but ask curiously. Yes, this is called a glass cup. It's an improved product of colored glass. It's more transparent and gives people a clearer feeling. As Yang Chendong explained, he picked up the glass in front of him and took a sip. Try it. The drinks inside are the real delicacies. I guarantee that none of you have tasted it before. Of course, no one had tasted it before. No matter if it was the apple juice, orange juice, peach juice, milk tea, or fruit tea placed in front of them, none of them had ever seen or heard of them before, let alone tasted them. The three women imitated Yang Chendong and began to taste it. They couldn't stop once they tasted it. In the end, they drank until their bellies were round and full. At this moment, they were a bit regretful. If they had known earlier, they wouldn't have eaten so much at lunch. Now that there was delicious food in front of them, they could only look and not drink. It was too much of a pity. The three women ate and drank their fill. It was already the middle of the afternoon. Only then did they feel that time had passed too quickly. Thinking that they were ready to go home, Yang Duo and Hu Yan's faces revealed expressions of reluctance. Seeing the two's intentions, Yang Chendong said to Yang Duo, "Seventh sister, this is your maiden home. If you don't want to go back, just stay here." This was something that Yang Chendong could only say to Yang Duo, but he couldn't do anything about Hu Yan. If he were to ask her to stay, he would definitely be treated as a lecher. He was afraid that when night fell, Hu Zhangning would kill him with a knife. "Thank you, sixth brother. Seventh sister, I still have to go back. No matter what, I am still a member of the Wang clan." Yang Duo shook her head and rejected Yang Chendong's good intentions. However, from her words, it could be heard that she was somewhat moved by the sixth young master's suggestion. That's right. Instead of wasting her youth and beauty on Wang Go who didn't know how to cherish himself, why not learn to be herself? Were other people's opinions really that important? Knowing that seventh sister wanted to be strong, before she made a decision, she had to do her own part. Yang Chendong couldn't persuade her anymore. However, he was not completely unprepared. He clapped his hands 3 times in the air, and then 10 young girls dressed like maids came in from outside. Looking at the 10 girls walking over, Yang Duo and Hu Yan were stunned. Even Xiao Yin, who didn't understand, looked at Yang Chendong with a puzzled expression. She didn't understand what the young master wanted to do. "The 10 of you, listen up. In the future, my seventh sister, Yang Duo, will be your master. You have to serve her with all your heart. Every month, this young master will give you 2 taels of silver as a monthly allowance. During festivals, your family will also receive some rice, noodles, and meat. In short, you will not be treated unfairly. However, if I hear that seventh sister has suffered any grievances in the Wang family in the future, then each and every one of you will be punished. Do you understand?" After the 10 people stood in place, Yang Chendong's cold voice suddenly rang out. Yang Chendong, who was like a completely different person from before, unconsciously emitted the aura of a superior person, causing Hu Yan, who was watching from the side, to be a little dazed. How could this person change so quickly? Just now, he was like the sun hanging high in the sky, which could melt people. At this moment, he was like the cold wind of winter, making people feel a chill go straight to the bottom of their hearts. "We understand." The 10 girls all bowed and replied in unison. Only then did the chill on Yang Chendong's body disappear. He then looked at the stunned Yang Duo and said, "Seventh sister, this is what sixth brother prepared for you. They will be by your side in the future. If you need anything, just call them. Sixth brother will settle all the expenses with them. Don't worry." With Yang Chendong's current financial resources, how many people couldn't be supported by him? It was just giving seventh sister 10 maids, it wasn't worth mentioning. As for Yang Duo, when she saw the 10 maids, she couldn't help but cry. When she married into the Wang family, there was a maid by her side. Unfortunately, after a serious illness, the maid couldn't survive and died. Only she was left alone. When she was bullied, she could only silently endure it in her heart. Ever since sixth brother appeared, everything had changed. The Wang family no longer dared to scold and beat her like before. Not only that, there were now 10 more maids. This was equivalent to raising her status all of a sudden. As such, she no longer had to worry about others giving her a hard time. This time, she truly felt the warmth of a family. "Sixth brother, thank you." She stretched out her hand and tightly patted Yang Chendong's big hand. Seventh sister, you are my biological sister. Doing anything for you is what I should do. Alright, when you leave in the future, bring some things back. With these 10 maids, 1,000 taels a month won't be enough. I'll give you double. 2,000 taels shouldn't be a problem. When the time comes, don't have the money to reward them. That would be too embarrassing. Also, prepare some food and clothes. If you are in a bad mood, don't eat with the Yang family and just cook for yourself. But there is one thing, you must not tell the other sisters. Otherwise, they will say that sixth brother favors one and discriminates against the other. When he said the last sentence, Yang Chendong had a bitter expression, as if he had suffered a great grievance. Yang Duo, who was originally very touched, was about to cry again. However, when she heard that she couldn't tell the other older sisters, she immediately pursed her lips and smiled. At that moment, she really looked back and smiled charmingly, making the 6 palaces pale in comparison. However, after laughing, Yang Duo still shook her head. "You'll be paying for these maids' expenses." 7th sister, why would I need so much money? 1,000 taels a month is more than enough to spend. Yang Duo wanted to refuse, but unexpectedly, Qiao Yin spoke up. 7th young lady, this is a small token of appreciation from the young master. You should accept it. Qiao Yin's identity was only Yang Chendong's personal maid. Logically speaking, she didn't have the qualifications to speak up in this kind of situation. But everyone could see that the 6th young master's attitude towards her was very unusual. If things didn't go well, she might become a concubine in the future. This was equivalent to marrying into the Yang family and becoming half a Yang family member. Who would look down on her then? Right. 7th sister only needs to accept this from 6th brother. Save up the excess and use it as a dowry in the future. Yang Chendong chuckled. But when he said this, Yang Duo's face turned even redder. She even buried her head deeply. After dealing with Yang Duo's matter, Yang Chendong looked at Hu Yen. Miss Hu, thank you for accompanying my 7th sister this time to relax. In order to express my gratitude, I have prepared some things. I'll have to trouble you to bring them along when you leave. Yang Chendong didn't say what it was, and Hu Yen was smart enough not to ask. It was as if everything was in tacit agreement. An hour later, the 3 carriages slowly left the gates of the Yang village. There were 2 more carriages than when they came. Not only that, there were 5 maids standing beside each carriage. These were all going to follow Yang Duo back to the Wang family. It could be imagined that when these people arrived at the Wang family, Wang Go and that unreasonable mother, Lady Yen, would be shocked. Not to mention how Yang Duo was after returning to the Wang family. After Hu Yen entered the city, she separated from Yang Duo. Behind the carriage she was in, there was another carriage following. The coachman was Yang Lu. This carriage was a gift from Yang Chendong to Hu Yen. He said it was to thank her for bringing 7th sister out to relax. But as for the real reason, only the 2 of them knew. Chapter 85. Hu Yen, who was sitting in the carriage, had a look of joy on her face. She even thought shyly that this wouldn't be the engagement gift from Dong Shuai, right? But she just didn't know what was inside. Was there the toilet paper that she promised her father? She was excited and worried all the way. When she arrived at the gate of the Hu mansion, Lieutenant Gao, who followed her, immediately asked the gatekeeper to find someone to unload the things. After the bags were unloaded, Yang Lu drove the carriage back, leaving behind Hu Zhangning, who had heard the news and rushed over with a look of surprise. Yen, what are these things? Don't tell me it's all toilet paper? Hu Zhangning asked in confusion. Father can see for himself. Daughter is tired and wants to go back to rest. She was holding a small package, which contained her white cheongsam and the sketch. In her opinion, these were the most important things. But after answering this sentence, Hu Yen didn't care what Yang Chendong gave her. She turned and left, leaving Hu Zhangning with a puzzled look. He had to let people carry the things into the courtyard first, and then look at them one by one. Needless to say, there must be toilet paper in the gift, and there was a lot of it. In the morning, the housekeeper of the Hu mansion and the housekeepers of the other ministers went to Yang village to ask for toilet paper, but to no avail. Then Hu Yen appeared. Presumably, they were more or less related, so this thing naturally couldn't be left out. Not only that, but there were also other good things sent, such as toothpaste, toothbrush, soap, cosmetics, and so on. There were also food, such as freshly dug potatoes and boxes of canned fish. There were all kinds of flavors in the canned fish. With the geographical location of Chichen City, fishing was not a problem at all. As long as this thing was sealed well and the taste was unique, there would naturally be no problems. The things were opened one by one, and Hu Zhangning sighed. This Yang Shima was really generous. Of course, what made him the happiest was that these were all obtained by Hu Yen. Did that mean that this kid also took a fancy to his daughter? Whether it was a match in terms of social status or talent, it seemed that the marriage between the two families was more suitable. 100 Flowers Hall. Yesterday, after the two songs were played, the reputation of this place went up a notch. Tonight, there were even more people coming, which made the head procuress, Mu Lily, smile all night long. It was a pity that there were too few tables in 100 Flowers Hall, and the place was not big enough. Otherwise, she would be able to earn more money. Just like before, the moment the two songs were played, everyone on the stage cheered. At the same time, voices urging them to stay rose and fell, as if they wanted to flip the roof of 100 Flowers Hall over. However, Madame Xue paid no attention to this and continued to walk down the platform. There were a total of 2 new songs. If she sang them over and over again, she was afraid that sooner or later, she would get tired of listening to them. This was not what she wanted. Madame Xue walked down the platform. Many people in the crowd disagreed with her. They all shouted to express their dissatisfaction. However, among the crowd, there was a man dressed in a brocade robe. He had a pointy mouth and cheeks that resembled a monkey's cheeks. Instead, he used all of his strength to raise his hands and flip the table in front of him to the ground. Following that, he shouted, "This general didn't allow you to leave? You can try to leave." The big movement of the table being flipped naturally attracted countless people's attention. For a moment, the hall became quiet. Even Madame Xue, who was about to leave, could not help but stop and look back. It was precisely this glance that caused him to be filled with terror. She knew that man. It was Xi Sheng, the Qianhu of the embroidered uniform guard. When it came to Xi Sheng, not many people knew of him. However, when it came to his elder brother, very few people didn't know of him. He was the eunuch Xi Ning, the eunuch who betrayed the great Ming dynasty and was executed by 1,000 cuts. However, the change of the Tumu castle had not happened yet. Naturally, Xi Ning was still in power and was even favored by the emperor. He also had a good relationship with Wang Lin, the chief steward of the ceremony directorate. With such a powerful elder brother, Xi Sheng naturally did things without scruples. In addition, he was a Qianhu of the embroidered uniform guard, which made him even more domineering. Just last year, he bullied Zhang Fu, the Duke of Ying, who had been a senior official for several dynasties and made outstanding contributions to the army. Zhang Fu did not dare to say anything and had a lot of land taken away from him. Today, he was here and flipped the table. How could the others not be shocked when they saw him? Especially Zhang De, the second son of Zhang Fu, who was in the crowd. Although his eyes were full of hatred, he did not have the courage to intervene in this matter. Even Duke Ying's son did not dare to intervene. Seeing this, the others could only endure and did not dare to say a word. Xi Sheng seemed to be very satisfied with the way people looked at him. He laughed and pointed at Madame Xue, saying, "I haven't heard enough. Sing one more time." As an entertainer, Madame Xue had seen many things like this. However, she still felt nervous. She felt that Xi Sheng did not come just to listen to the song. He probably had other purposes. Since he was not as powerful, he had to obey. Seeing Xi Sheng's domineering and arrogant attitude, Madame Xue knew that she could not avoid it today. She had to force a smile and bow to him. Then she turned to the stage. The procuress, Mu Lily, immediately arranged for someone to prepare a new table and send it to Xi Sheng. Xi Sheng then crossed his legs and raised his head, looking insufferably arrogant as he continued to listen to Madame Xue's song. "Your Excellency, Madame Xue's skin is really good. If I can hug her for one night, my life will not be in vain." The subordinate beside him flattered and looked at Madame Xue on the stage, drooling. "It's not difficult. I have to be on duty tonight. Forget it. Tomorrow is my day off. I'll come here to have fun for one night. By the way, check the person behind Baihua Hall. Tell him that I like this place and want to buy it." Xi Sheng said indifferently. Even Duke Ying had been bullied by him. She was just an insignificant entertainer. How could she jump to the top? "Yes, Your Excellency. I'll do it right away." The servant answered and turned to leave. A pimp who was serving tea to a guest at a nearby table had his ears pricked up. When he heard these words, he immediately revealed a look of fear. However, he quickly pretended to be calm. After thinking for a while, he went backstage. There was a limit to what a pimp could do. The benefits he could get from the kind of place he worked for were proportional. Baihua Hall's business was very good now, and they usually received a lot of rewards. However, if Madame Shui was replaced, they would get less money if something happened to her. They might not even be able to continue their business. For his own sake, he had to tell the procuress, Mu Lily, about this. Backstage, Mu Lily was looking at the stage with a worried expression. She was worried that something would happen later. As the big sister of the 100 Flowers Hall's procuress, she naturally knew what kind of person Xixing was and what kind of morals he had. Miss Mu. The pimp came to Mu Lily's side and whispered in her ear what he had just heard. Then, Mu Lily's expression turned into one of shock. Her originally pretty face turned pale at this moment. What should we do? Under Xixing's threat, Madame Shui had to sing the 2 songs again. Fortunately, there were no more heckling. Xixing walked out of Baihua Hall accompanied by several of his men. Everything seemed to be fine after the storm. Only Mu Lily, who had heard the news, knew that it was not that Xixing wanted to stop, but that he had regarded Baihua Hall as his property. That was why he did not make trouble. Madame Shui went backstage, exhaled a long breath of fragrance, and wiped her forehead gently. When she saw Mu Lily coming from afar, she forced a smile and said, "Sister, I'm fine." "Well, it's not fine this time. It's serious." Mu Lily sighed and told Xiao Yuxue what she had just heard from the pimp. What? Sure enough, Madame Shui, who had heard the news, didn't look any better than Mu Lily did just now. "Sister, do you think our boss can sell Baihua Hall to Xixing? If it's someone else, I don't know." But who is Xixing? Last year, he even dared to occupy Duke Ying's fertile land, and nothing happened. I heard that the emperor punished them later, but now they have regained their prestige, haven't they? She did not say whether it was possible or not, but the comparison between Duke Ying and Madame Shui had proved her idea. What should we do? What should we do? Madame Shui was really anxious at this moment. She had thought that she could make more money as a young actress and a top courtesan. In this way, even if she was old and could not sing anymore, she would have enough money to spend the rest of her life. She could even find a good man to marry as long as she kept her chastity. But all of this seemed to have become a flower in the mirror, the moon in the water. Once 100 Flowers Hall became Xixing's property, with the other party's character, he would probably eat her up that very night. Then she would become a money-making tool. Once she grew old, she would probably become useless. Madame Shui shook her head desperately at the thought of all her efforts over the years. Her face was full of unwillingness. "Yuxue, I don't want to do this. Is this our fate? We can't change it. Didn't you see that when Xixing stood out, no one dared to say anything? This is the general trend. We can't change it." Mu Lily hugged Madame Shui and cried bitterly together. Chapter 86. No. There must be a way. There must be a way. Lady Snow shook her head, unwilling to accept such a fate. She had just learned 2 new songs from Dong Shui, and the whole capital knew about her. Seeing that everything was going well, she was unwilling to let her dream end before it even began. Yes, Dong Shui. For some reason, Yang Chendong's handsome and confident face flashed through Lady Snow's mind. The capital in the 9th month was not as hot as it was during the day at night, and when the cold wind blew, one would feel a chill. Outside the Yang village, Yang Chendong had washed up and was about to go to bed. At this time, Tiger's Mane's voice came from outside. "Young master, Lady Snow wants to see you." What is she doing here so late at night? Hearing that Lady Snow was here, he looked at the time. The curfew should have started in the capital. It would be very difficult for Lady Snow to return to 100 Flowers Hall at this time. While Yang Chendong was still thinking about what could make a girl come to him so late at night, Tiger's Mane's voice sounded again. "Young master, do you need me to wake Xiao Yin up and ask her to come?" "No need." Yang Chendong waved his hand. He had arranged for Xiao Yin to go to bed first. In his own words, women were made of water. If they wanted good skin, they needed good sleep. It was precisely this sentence that caused this habit to become a natural one. Unless there was something special, Xiao Yin would go to bed early. Right now, Xiao Yin was probably already asleep. Without knowing what the other party wanted, it wouldn't be appropriate to rashly wake Xiao Yin up. Forget it. Bring her to the study. Yang Chendong thought for a while, put on his coat, and then strolled toward the study. When Tiger's Mane took Lady Snow to the study, Yang Chendong was writing something with his head down. If someone was there, they would know that he was writing a classic play, The Legend of the White Snake, which was later made into a TV series and remade several times. It was also called The New Legend of the White Snake. Madame Snow was brought in. She was wrapped in a long robe, but she was wearing a pair of embroidered shoes that were convenient for walking on the platform. It could be seen that she had come out in a hurry. Is something the matter? She slowly raised her head and looked at Madame Shui from head to toe. She sighed that no matter what she dressed up, she could always attract men's attention. Madame Shui, who had been afraid and anxious, calmed down a lot after Yang Chendong looked at her. She didn't know why. But when she thought of the problems that Hundred Flowers Hall might face, she knelt on the ground with a plop. Dong Shui, save me. Please save Lady Shui. If there's anything, get up and talk. Yang Chendong put down the writing brush in his hand and looked at Madame Snow. What's the matter? Tell me in detail. Madame Snow lowered her head and cried. She was really pitiful. While crying softly, she told him what had happened in Hundred Flowers Hall in the evening. She also told him what the pimp had overheard and what Mu Lily had said to her. Shi Sheng. When Yang Chendong heard the name, he felt it was familiar. But he had only been in the capital for a few days. How could he know everyone? In particular, Shi Sheng was just a Qianhu of the brocade guard, a nobody in his eyes. Seeing Yang Chendong's confusion, Tiger's Mane, who was standing next to him, quickly took out a book. After searching for a while, he found Shi Sheng's name. He handed the book to Yang Chendong. Young master, please take a look. He took the book and saw Shi Sheng's name. The investigation of the security bureau was written on it. Humph! What the hell? When Yang Chendong saw that Shi Sheng had a brother named Shi Ning, he remembered this person. Shi Ning was a famous traitor in history. Because of him, the capital was almost captured. Seriously speaking, if Yu Qian hadn't stood up for him, the whole capital would have fallen because of him. At that time, the history of the Great Ming Dynasty would have been rewritten. When Yang Chendong got angry, Tiger's Mane naturally emitted a murderous aura. Young master, do you need me to go to the city now to find this person and then? Madame Snow knelt in front of him. Obviously, she couldn't see Tiger's Mane's beheading gesture. But Yang Chendong saw it clearly. No, it's not necessary. At this time, you still have to go to the city. However, I'm afraid that you'll still have to make a trip into the city. Do you know who the current owner of Hundred Flowers Hall is? Young master, it's Fan Ling. He was the vice director of the Ministry of War, a secondary class level 5 official. His father used to be the minister of Honglu Temple. As expected of the director of the security bureau, Tiger Shine, who had slowly gotten into his role, quickly reported the other party's identity. Of course, all this had a close relationship with Hundred Flowers Hall that Yang Chendong had paid attention to. Find him and buy Madame Snow's slave contract. Yang Chendong made a decision after a short hesitation. It was not the right time to have a direct conflict with a villain like Shi Sheng. At least, he couldn't look for trouble. There was only one way to solve the problem, which was to buy Madame Snow. In this way, even if Shi Sheng got Hundred Flowers Hall, he would only get an empty shell. Tiger's Mane immediately understood the meaning of the sixth young master. He answered and turned to leave. Madame Snow suddenly said. She came to Yang Chendong for help, but it was just an impulsive act. She didn't have any hope. Dong Shui was powerful, but he was only talented. Compared to power, he was much weaker. She didn't think that the sixth young master could do anything to Shi Sheng, who even Duke Ying, a hero of the Great Ming Dynasty, couldn't afford to offend. However, she never thought that Yang Chendong would agree to her request so easily. Moreover, he even wanted to buy her slave contract directly. Amidst his excitement, he thought of his elder sister, Mu Lily. If he left and his elder sister did not, he could imagine how Xixing would treat him. It would be a fate worse than death. There was also her maid Xiaowei. She had been using her for so many years, so she couldn't give her up. At this time, Madame Snow didn't realize that she came to ask for help. She didn't have such awareness. She just thought about how to take her family members to her side, so she shouted, "Wait. Is there anything else?" Yang Chendong looked at Madame Snow with a puzzled expression. Did she still want to stay in Hundred Flowers Hall? If so, it would be more difficult to help her. Yes, please understand, Dong Shuai. This servant still has my elder sister Mu Lily and the maid Xiaowei in Hundred Flowers Hall. If this servant leaves alone, Yang Chendong understood that this was a loyal and affectionate Madame Snow. He liked this kind of person. He immediately said to Tiger's Mane, who was still standing there, "Did you hear that? There are 3 people in total. By their slave contracts. Don't be afraid to spend money." Tiger's Mane answered and turned to leave. As for how to enter the city in the middle of the night, it was not a problem for Yang Chendong, the number 1 master beside him. The matter was solved. Although she didn't see the answer, Madame Snow couldn't help but trust Yang Chendong. Especially at this time, the confidence he showed made her feel infatuated. Only the 2 of them were left in the room. Suddenly, there was a very awkward and ambiguous atmosphere in the study. Yang Chendong was the first to feel the difference. At this time, he regretted that he didn't let Tiger's Mane take Madame Snow to rest first, so he wanted to call for help. He knew that even if Tiger's Mane wasn't here for the time being, Beta Persei, Yang Si and the others would be outside. It could be said that whenever he needed, they would appear at any time. But for some reason, Yang Chendong didn't want to let anyone take Madame Snow away. In this very contradictory mood, he looked at Madame Snow and said unconsciously, "Well, I'll arrange for someone to take you to rest." This was obviously not an order, but a tone of negotiation. Madame Snow was delighted, but she quickly shook her head. "I'm not sleepy now. What are you writing, Dong Shuai?" After saying this, Madame Snow stood up and walked to Yang Chendong leisurely. Faced with Madame Snow's approach, Yang Chendong, who could remain calm even if Mount Tai collapsed in front of him, could clearly feel his heart beating faster at this moment. In order to ease the awkwardness, he casually said, "I'm writing a story about love." Really? Dong Shuai's literary talent has long been known in the capital. I wonder if I have the luck to read it first? It seemed that she was asking, but when she finished speaking, she had taken the initiative to walk to Yang Chendong's side and bent down. Because the temperature in the study was suitable, Madame Snow had already taken off her coat and robe. At this time, she was wearing a wide collar top. When she lowered her head, Yang Chendong saw a touch of snow white looming in front of him. Some things couldn't be ignored just because you didn't want to. On the contrary, some things you said you didn't want to think about, but you couldn't help thinking about it in your heart. At this time, Yang Chendong was obviously the latter. His eyes followed the touch of snow white and seemed to see 2 tall mountains. Madame Snow's skin was very white. Among all the women he knew, only Hu Yen could be compared with her. As the saying went, 100 ugliness could cover up 100 ugliness, not to mention that Madame Snow was a first-class beauty. Against the dim light of the oil lamp in the study, she really made people feel that they were looking at a beauty under the lamp. The more they looked at her, the more attracted they were. Madame Snow seemed to be looking down at Yang Chendong's manuscript, but in fact, she had been paying attention to his changes. Although she was a performer and not a prostitute, she had heard and seen a lot of things in the red light district, so she naturally knew how to interact with men. You're tuning in to the Wang Lin's Journey YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.